wrong. Look. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 would be the second.
Competitive dance should have been regulated 40 years ago. We live in a world where we're so okay with corruption and exploitation, even of children.
This abuse was even more serious. It was regular, continuous abuse.
I think for a long time I didn't really see myself as a human being. I saw myself as an athlete or a swimmer and not a person. So it was pretty depressed. I felt like I didn't want to be alive anymore.
Now the government has to come in and say, hey, could you cool it with how much you're making these kids work out?
There are things you cannot do to children.
Yeah, little kids' faces, Abby.
Grow up.
You grow up.
Happy Halloween, friends. It's not Halloween. I'm just wearing a Halloween corgi shirt. And I got my little friend here. He doesn't have a name. He's just cute. Anyway, yeah, I decided to wear a corgi shirt. I was kind of torn between this and my shirt that my mom says looks like Halloween threw up on me, but I chose this one because I don't know you an explanation for wearing a Halloween corgi shirt. So for those of you who might be new to the channel, my name's Tiana, and basically I started this channel originally to talk about psych things, but there's a whole lot of other passions that I have. I also do vlogs now, but my channel first started with my complex trauma series videos. And if you haven't watched it, I'm basically outlining like the bad that came along with growing up in competitive dance. So I use all the information that I've gathered in my education up until this point to kind of highlight the issues. And I was just tired of hearing stories basically about the stuff that's still happening in my studio. So that's where that started. I kind of took a break because there was a lot of backlash, whatever. I had every intention of going back into the youth sports videos and that kind of stuff. I always just want to be an advocate for kids. So that's kind of where this video is heading. So when this documentary came across my newsfeed this morning, your girl was hype because they are talking about everything that I constantly talk about when people ask me about, you know, not just competitive dance, it's typically just competitive dance, but youth sports as a whole. This will be kind of a preview of me going into the other videos. It'll be mostly targeted towards competitive dance, but it kind of applies to youth sport and just like unhealthy group dynamics in general. So I was really happy that this could start the conversation again in a more organic way on my channel. I'm gonna try my best not to ramble. I'm really bad at that, but I've said it in the past and it has rung true. It's true. I find that I speak the best and I make the most impact when I'm not rigidly scripted and when I'm just going off of my passion, my like just genuine desire to just make things better for kids these days, especially teenagers. So this isn't very scripted. I might ramble. I'm gonna have to edit the heck out of this. It is what it is. Also, the thing that kind of propelled me into talking about this is I know there's going to be a lot of people with the new school year coming up, putting their kids into sports. So that's also why I wanted to make this video. So the documentary in question was a documentary highlighting just basically everything that bothers me about competitive youth sports. The documentary interviews people from gymnastics, from figure skating, from swimming, and it's really well done. And a lot of the researchers that are mentioned in it, I've already kind of read papers and listened to some of their work before. So that's what also made it really exciting for me in my nerd brain, because I'm a nerd and I'm super weird and team weird. So in the documentary, there was a swimmer. I can't say her last name because I butcher French. I'm not good at French. I'm really sorry. I promise I'm still pro-French Canadian. I just can't do it myself. So we're just going to call her Gabby or Gabrielle. Gabrielle was a competitive swimmer, and she was one of the first to kind of raise alarm bells in the community, I guess. The things that she said, like her story's a lot like mine. When I started to go into phys ed, that's when I started to really start to believe the feelings that I already had towards how I was treated by my coach and just kind of the culture around me at large.
It was really during my kinesiology studies that I started to question things. Why do the exact opposite of what I learned in class during our training?
That's when that was the hook for me, and I was like, I gotta keep watching this. She also goes on later on to talk about how she felt trapped, like she had no way out, and that was another thing with me. Like I say it time and time again, I think had I not been so trauma bonded to my coach, I would have left. I also was like very much, I didn't know who I was without dance, and I felt I needed it to feel like I was worthy. So that feeling of being trapped, I was so relieved to finally hear other athletes start to speak in this way. This documentary also really highlights the problems with minimizing emotional and psychological abuse of children. We know from research that emotional and psychological abuse, I'm going to shout it from the rooftops, we have known for years that that kind of abuse is just as harmful. You don't have to lay a hand on anybody to seriously traumatize them. It's frustrating for me to see professionals, whether it be teachers, medical professionals, coaches themselves, justify this kind of behavior when they know that it's not okay to be doing these kinds of things to kids and treating children this way. And one of the doctors actually, he highlights the fact that youth sports will create a system around a child of experts who, by all accounts, know better, but they're only there to make the child's performance increase. Okay, so then after we talk about Gabrielle, we get Professor Peter Donnelly, and I've listened to some talks and read some of his papers in the past, very recently. And I really like his work too, because he definitely is one who sees through it all.
I asked all of them, what did you love about participation? And they said, being really good at something, being better than other people, the travel, some of the people we met, and then 2-3 minutes later, that was it. And then when I started to talk about the bad, they talked for 2 hours.
So another thing that I also appreciated that I don't think is talked about enough when we criticize the negative aspects of competitive youth sport is the, glorification of suffering. A lot of times in competitive youth sport, there's not a lot of autonomy. You do what that adult in charge of you said. I said this in my original videos on complex trauma from dance. I said that I looked into what professional children who are in the acting, singing, just entertainment industry as a whole, what is legal and is not legal for them in terms of labor. The things that I myself was subjected to and expected to do, again, in this glorification of suffering, is totally illegal in the entertainment industry when you're working with minors. This documentary highlights Norway as an example of how we need to start limiting. Like, we live in a world where we're so okay with corruption and exploitation, even of children, that it's not common sense and we can't control ourselves anymore as adults working with vulnerable populations. Now the government has to come in and say, hey, could you cool it with how much you're making these kids work out? That's what Norway's doing.
Tuva has about 20 hours of school per week. In Norway's dual career system, young athletes must also prepare for a secondary career. And the sports training schedule is restricted.
When we train like 20 hours a week, it's a lot. And then our body needs to rest. It needs to gather more energy again. So therefore we have to train light.
There is a limited number of hours kids can train. This is another thing that I have a hard time talking about because I know the instinct of parents is to blame themselves. Again, I need you to say to yourself constantly, whenever you have that urge, it's not my fault, I didn't know, and I'm doing better. That's all you gotta say to yourself. They talk about the United Nations.
An international conference brought together key players from the world of sport and human rights activism.
The reason this conference exists is because the UN guiding principles on business and human rights exist. So our idea in the human rights community, our concept, has been to apply the rules of human rights to sport, to clamp down on these horrific human rights abuses.
I have read parts of this document that they're talking about. They basically make a case to say, among a lot of other cases, that youth sport is now starting to cross over into child labor.
A proposal by activists to apply general employment protections toward young athletes.
When a child trains intensively, he or she will compete in a context where there are many interests. their sponsors, their economic interests, their political interests. There's an expectation of results.
We want children to be a protected class, just like they are in schools, like they are in the healthcare system, in the legal system, in social welfare system. Children, there are things you cannot do to children.
So if it's not okay to do for children who are being paid in the entertainment industry, then why are we allowing it in sport? Why do we think it's okay? And one of the experts that was consulted in the documentary actually says that. He's like, why is it when we walk into the stadium that all of these laws just completely fade? And I'm like, yeah, sport has a double standard still. It's not legal to treat children this way. Again, I'm going to say it again. Emotional and psychological abuse of children is illegal, and you are mandated to report it. But as soon as you walk into that studio or the track or the ice rink, all of that flies out the window because kids' biology and their evolution should know better. There's a reason why it's illegal everywhere. There's a reason why. If my coach was a teacher at a high school treating the kids the way she was treating us, she would no longer be allowed to teach because kids, their biology doesn't know. We evolved in conditions where we saw those adults around us, even if they weren't our parents, as people to trust and look up to and take seriously. You can't control that. That is an innate biological, genetic, evolutionary mechanism in our brains and in our nervous systems. I feel the same way as this professor who's like, I don't understand why all of that just flies out the window.
And so this series of interviews really got me going. I began to look what would be remedy for this, and that's when I began to look at children's rights treaties and also at child labor regulations. But of course, nobody wanted to hear it. Nobody wants to associate, the play with work, or to hear anything bad about sport participation for children. And it was a struggle. It was a struggle for many years.
This is 100% falls under child labor. But because society sees sport differently and likes to, again, glorify the suffering and physical labor that is involved and loss of years of your childhood and very important developmental years, we glorify that and we think it's good for kids.
Some parents will be super harsh and neglectful of their kids and then take credit for toughening them up. They'll go, we taught our kids to overcome adversity. And it's like, it doesn't count if you were the adversity.
Because it's preparing them for the future. No, it's not. It's actually detrimental to their futures because they didn't get normal experiences to build that foundation that can then go on in adulthood and walk through things with resilience. Because suck it up, gets harder as you get older, kid. Figure it out. That's not how kids learn. The other thing that I also appreciate, it seemed like it was a nice space for parents to just be honest and vulnerable and be like, how did we not see this?
It really hits you. You feel utterly powerless. You ask yourself, how did this happen? Why didn't I intervene sooner? I just couldn't believe it.
Place the blame on the people who are content to do this to other people, whether it be children, whether it be parents, whether it be a congregation. Because that is the person who is lying, manipulating, influencing, exploiting, bullying the people around them to get what they want. But then there's this added thing, like what I grew up around is they know where to hide it, which means they know it's wrong, they know it's socially unacceptable, but they're better at hiding it. That's how my coach has gotten away with doing this stuff to kids for years. And because parents are treated so horribly, they, much like children, when they're in environments like this, they're going to blame themselves too. How could I not see it? And then the coach is so overbearing and at times just verbally and psychologically and emotionally aggressive and just such a bully and so good at influencing people that the parents are misled to believe that this is fine. The parents are now under the control of the coach. And the kids are very aware of it. And this is another thing that goes into this glorification of suffering. What in the sports literature, we actually call it overconformity to the sport ethic, I think. It's when you sacrifice.
That's who she is.
I understand
and she doesn't
that.
use that to define her. She doesn't use it as a crutch, but every now and then she does have pain, which is real.
But there's no injury.
It's real.
I'm about this far from pulling the duet.
No, she needs to do the duet to prove to you that she's capable of dancing and dancing well through pain.
I know, but
even through pain and injury, like that's a good thing. And you're teaching children to be okay with that. You're teaching the parents that that's acceptable, because in the end of the day, the kids, when they do want to say something and it is too much for them, they have seen their coach either through implicit ways of screaming at kids, berating them when they complain.
You deserve nothing else. You earn it. You can't stand here and cry.
Well, if you yell at me, I'm gonna cry.
Get out. Go.
You don't speak up, basically. So it can be explicitly or implicitly said.
So you're done. Go ahead. Use that door. Goodbye. Girls, I don't need the tears. You're 9, 10, and 11 years old.
Exactly!
What are all the tears about? I don't understand. Why
You don't
are you crying?
understand?
No.
Because you're screaming in little kids' faces!
Little kids' faces!
Yeah, little kids' faces, Abby!
Grow up!
You grow up!
Well, my mother would have came in and beat my butt when I couldn't count to 8.
And because they notice that their parents are also under the influence of the coach.
Abby's the best. The girls, they were just being taught the things that they forgot about the trio. It was no big deal.
They're not going to go home and tell their parents either. Also, without all of that conditioning and like social learning that they have, children automatically blame themselves regardless of all these other dynamics at play. So all of that to say, basically, I think I did a good job not rambling, is I'm definitely going to get into this. I'm so glad that this kind of propelled me back into that. I am so glad things like this are being talked about more, especially in like formal settings, not just like podcasts or channels like mine. Whether you've got a kid in competitive sport or you're thinking about it, or even if it's just recreational sport, I think this is something you really need to watch. We also need to be patient with ourselves. We have to understand that we don't always know what's going on. The more we have these conversations, the more we continue to push for better legislation. You know, dance is not regulated yet. That's the other thing I wanted to get into before closing, is competitive dance should have been regulated 40 years ago. It is not regulated yet. It drives me nuts that it's not. It is if you're doing it under like the POM and like dance team, drill team kind of stuff domain. That's not a huge thing in Canada. Not that regulation always protects kids. We are seeing it constantly how even regulatory bodies are not protecting kids. But I think starting with regulating dance is an important thing. So at the end of the day, the question is, what can we do? What do we do? Just seeing that it's being talked about more is a good step. But at the end of the day, these videos are not to guilt parents, to make people scared, to vilify certain individuals in our communities. These videos are to inform you and empower you to make better choices for you and your kids. I am brutally honest when it comes to my own stuff that I've dealt with. Too many kids are struggling. Too many, like literal teenagers. And if it's problematic to come forward and do the right thing, you gotta reassess, man. She's not paying my therapy bills. I am. And I don't pay $160 an hour to overreact to something. I didn't do that. I don't read things. I don't constantly advocate. I work with kids. This is just kind of a consequence of our just general state of the world right now, with increasing authoritarianism, fascism, poor economies, all of that fun stuff. Internet stress. It's very easy for people to be very triggered by the truth, and that's something I'm going to get into once we talk about this further, especially as it like applies to youth sport and the studio specifically. But I don't do this to make people mad. I do this to make people think. I didn't create this channel to tell people what they want to hear. I'm not that person anymore. I'm not going to do that because it didn't do me any good, and it's not going to do the world any good. I don't intentionally try to antagonize people. I am trying to change your minds and your hearts to look around and see what's going on. I don't tell you what you want to hear. I tell you what I think you need to hear. I'm genuinely passionate about this, and I feel it's a disservice to not just the community as a whole, but the kids who grew up looking up to me. It is doing them a disservice, and their parents, who I still deeply care about. by sitting on all this information. That is selfish to me. That's enabling someone to continue to do what they're doing by sitting back and going, not my problem. I can afford therapy. They should know better. That's not the kind of person that I am. You know what? I'd rather have a small group of people who know me and love me for who I am and what I stand for than an entire dance studio for propping up something that I no longer think is a good thing. So that's why I'm going to continue this series. Again, I'll overlap it with other things I've learned, like church culture is often a lot like dance culture in weird ways. I'll get into it because people are like, how? Oh, trust me, friends, it is. Yeah, so thank you for watching this. I hope I didn't ramble too much, and I really hope that you stick around. Please share these videos, talk about it, be kind to yourselves. Please be kind to yourselves, especially you as parents, okay? And please try not to put so much pressure on your kids this school year. Like, they're doing their best. Please, it's not worth it. So, with that, thank you so much for watching. Happy Halloween. It's not Halloween, it's still August, but you know what? I'm wearing my corgi shirt and I'm talking to a ghost that is not a sentient being. Doesn't matter. Bye!